Jason's father died young, and after his mother remarried, Hart developed a strange fixation. At 25, Hart became obsessed with the 45-year-old Phyllis. To keep her in sight, Hart hired her as his executive assistant. Within a month, Hart had her promoted to replace me as coup. When the flash flood hit, Hart abandoned both me and the grandmother who had raised him. Sophia, get lost. Hart blamed his Nana's death on me, threw me out at midnight, and dragged me through a divorce. Yet when I truly prepared to leave with my fiancé, Hart chased me all the way to Eastbrook, eyes shattered and desperate. Sophia, please don't go. That night was my birthday in our second year of marriage. I was rifling through Jason's recently deleted folder when I found a video of him and Phyllis. The thumbnail froze my lungs. Jason, unaware, stood with his back to me in a kitchen apron, lifting the lid on the claypot chicken Hart always cooks for my birthday. Just a few more minutes, sweetheart, Hart said, smiling over his shoulder. I mumbled an answer and tapped play. A 12-minute WhatsApp screen recording. Hart had pinned her feed to full screen. The woman had stripped, facing the lens. Jason's smaller window showed his rapt, trembling gaze. I closed my eyes, my palms shook. The folds of her belly bore violet stretch marks. I knew her, Phyllis, his new assistant of only a month. Dinner's ready, babe. Hart set the fragrant pot in front of me. The smell hit and I gagged. You okay? You're white as a sheet. Should I call the doctor? Hart cupped my cheek. We've finally made it, haven't we? Not the broke kids who could only afford the mini claypot anymore. I stared at the table. 5 years earlier we'd been crammed into a 200-square-foot studio. We'd clip a coupon that covered a single mini claypot chicken with steamed rice. I'd add an extra portion of plain rice and the bill landed dead on $20. Jason would fish out a few scraps of bok choy, wolf down his serving, pat his stomach, and slide every piece of chicken thigh onto my plate. Eat up, wife, or I'll finish it, hearted tease, canine tooth flashing. Then at 3 a.m. I'd hear his hunger gurgle as Hart tossed and sighed. Why the tears? Hart dabbed the corner of my eye with his thumb. I came back to the present and dropped a chunk of meat into his bowl. Even now, in our villa with Hail Tech on the stock exchange, Hart still cooks that simple claypot on my birthday, to honor the lean years. His own eyes were rimmed red as Hart lifted his chopsticks. A ringtone sliced the quiet. When Hart saw Phil on the screen, Hart answered instantly. Jason, my boy's stomach is killing me and his dad's away, so scared. Her broken sob yanked him to his feet. Hang on, Phil, I'm coming. Halfway to the door, Hart remembered me and waved. I'll be right back, eat. I swallowed the lump in my throat. Go. Hart vanished. The piece of chicken I'd served him sat on the table, cold. I waited until 2 a.m., Hart never returned. I'd fought him over Phyllis all month, and because Hart always took her side, I no longer had the strength to call. At dawn the phone jarred me awake. His side of the bed was still empty. Babe, I've thought it over, Hart chirped. I don't want you stressed, so let's take you out of the coup seat. Jason's father died early, the family firm collapsed. The next year his mother remarried. Nana raised him alone. His uncle started rival businesses and offered no help. Hart aced the city's top high school but quit to spare her tuition bills and spent 10 years on a construction site. 5 years ago we co-founded Hail Tech. 2 years ago we signed the marriage license. I never cared about the coup title. Anyone could have it, just not Phyllis. 45, with 30 days on the payroll, she was glaringly unqualified. So I vetoed his proposal without hesitation. Why? Hart sighed. Sweetheart, are you as narrow-minded as the bored fossils who look down on Phil? I hung up, drove to the tower. Inside the lobby, 5-year veteran Chloe marched out clutching a box. 2 coworkers trailed her. I only said that Assistant Rowan's old and slow. Why the termination letter? She sobbed. Been here since day one. Does Jason remember loyalty? They glanced at me. Shut it, everyone knows the boss shields her, and you still charged the gun. I rode the elevator, strode to his office. The door was ajar. Phyllis's muffled weeping leaked through. Maybe I shouldn't stay. Jason crooned, don't say that, what would I do without you? My pulse pounded. I shut the door. My husband, like a homesick child, had buried his face between her breasts. Black dots swarmed my vision. I gripped the handle. Phyllis gasped. They sprang apart. Jason, unruffled, guided me to a chair. Listen, love, Hart murmured, brows arched in coaxing apology. With Hail Tech stable you don't need to sweat the details, spend time with Nana instead. We've been married 2 years, time to try for a baby. His warm palm covered mine, I felt ice. When I opened my mouth his voice snapped cold. The board can't veto me, Sophia, can't you act like a proper wife for once? That stare, vacant, merciless, I'd seen it 5 years ago when a site foreman pinned him and Hart answered with a brick. I shivered and gave a tiny nod. I've always known. Jason clawed his way up, fierce and unyielding. Once Hart decides, bones break before heart bends. Fine. Nana hates the nursing home, go pick her up and bring her home. Hart swapped his scowl for a smile, stroked my head the way you calm a puppy. I left the office like a puppet, like a defeated general slinking off the battlefield. From start to finish, Phyllis never said a word. She only smiled faintly, watching me sideways. She knew my husband would fix everything for her. I drove through the storm to the nursing home. The aides inside were frantic. The old lady ran outside. Jason's Nana was 85, her mind clouded by Alzheimer's, her legs unreliable. Where could she go? I knew how much she meant to him, so I speed dialed his number. First call, no answer. Second call, Phyllis picked up. Jason's in the shower, his phone's out here, she told me, voice syrupy with laughter. Yet I could hear her echo in the receiver, the hiss of the shower, the swallowed gasps. Tell Jason's missing. I shut my eyes and hung up. The aides and I circled the city for half an hour before rescue rang. They said she was on the riverfront gathering driftwood that the current had carried down. When her own children abandoned her and she'd raised Jason in poverty, she'd collect riverwood every rainy season for firewood. Her memory was frozen in Jason's childhood. My nose stung. When I reached her, she was almost swept away by the muddy current. Rescue couldn't hold her. I sloshed in, dragged her ashore, and a dozen reporters lunged, shutters clicking. Sophia, what the hell are you doing? Jason arrived in a rage, just in time to see me hauling Nana toward the cameras. Hart wrapped his groggy grandmother in his coat, grabbed my collar, and hissed, "You can't even protect an old woman, trying to humiliate me on purpose? Hailtech is a marquee name in Eastbrook, haven't you got that much common sense?" I knew how much the self-made, face-saving Jason cared, but there'd been no time to think. I kept silent, my cold lips trembling. Hart glanced at my drenched clothes, a flicker of pity in his eyes. "And you still have the nerve to look down on Phil. If she hadn't guessed Nana would be at the river, I couldn't have gotten here so fast." Phyllis patted Jason's arm, unruffled. "Let it go, Jason, Nana comes first. Your wife didn't mean any harm." Those two sentences smoothed his scowl. "That's why I said step down as COO and take a real rest." Hart put me in the car with Nana and headed for St. Mary's. Up front, Phyllis rattled on about her two boys, Jason listening while Hart drove, a soft smile tugging at his eyes. "Oh, speaking of my little guys," Phyllis knit her delicate brows. "They'll be out of school soon, Jason, I have to pick them up." She reached for the door, but Jason caught her wrist. "No way, Phil, you don't drive, and you won't find a cab in this rain. I'll take you." Phyllis glanced back at Nana and me. "But you need to get Nana to the hospital, and there's no room for everyone." Jason braked and met my eyes in the mirror, his gaze flickering. "Babe, grab a cab and take Nana to the hospital. I'll be right behind you." I never thought Hart'd actually dump me there. I stood outside the window, glaring through the passenger glass. "Jason, didn't you see the news? The river's rising, it'll hit downtown any minute." "What about Nana?" Jason raked a hand through his hair. "I said I'll be back." Hart sped away with Phyllis. Hart never guessed that half an hour later Hart would lose the woman Hart loved most. By then Nana and I were in a yellow cab, 500 yards from St. Mary's. Traffic froze, people abandoned their cars. I saw brown water surging up the street, carrying trash and whole tree trunks. Screams whipped past us. The road behind was blocked too. Flash flood, the driver shrieked, and bolted. My hands went limp, but I clutched Nana's wrist. "No, I have to wait for Jason." Alzheimer's chose that moment to tighten its grip. She turned stubborn as stone, I couldn't budge her. In 2 minutes water filled the floorboards. Nana insisted on waiting for her husband, so I fought down panic and video called Jason. "Jason, the flood's here, come get us." Nana won't move. The second his face appeared I broke down. His end was chaos, Phyllis's 2 kids shrieking in the back seat. "Jason, what do I do?" The frame caught half of Phyllis's face as she clung to his arm in the front. "Can't we keep going? Get the kids somewhere safe first?" I saw her tears soak his sleeve. "Jason." I was desperate. On-screen Hart clenched his jaw. "Babe, take Nana and run with the crowd. I've got to get the kids to safety." Hart gave me a quick, soothing look, then cut the call. I lowered the phone, water already at my thighs. "Water, water." Nana finally panicked and crawled from the cab. I fought floating debris, shoved her up onto a delivery van. People on a second-floor balcony hauled us up. But Nana's mind snapped again. She mumbled about finding her grandson and plunged into water over an adult's head. Nana, I'd just reached the roof. When I grabbed for her, she yanked me in. Later, bitter muddy water closed over me, and I lost her hand. When I came to, I lay in a rescue rubber dinghy. Nana lay beside me, breathless, an officer's jacket covering her face. Terror and guilt shook me so hard my teeth rattled. She was Jason's only family. What would Hart think of me? Babe. The cruel twist, Jason's own rescue boat idled up seconds later. Hart leaned over, checking me for injuries. Only when Hart was sure I was intact did Hart exhale. Then Hart noticed the sleeve poking from beneath the jacket. His pupils shrank. What happened to Nana? Words jammed in my throat, mouth full of river grit. Say something. Why are you crying? Hart shook my shoulders. When I still couldn't speak, Hart jerked the coat back. Then came the collapse. Jason, don't blame Sophia. In a crisis, people save themselves first, it's instinct. Phyllis tossed the death at my feet, light as a feather. I glared at her through clenched teeth, only to see Jason's coat draped over her shoulders. Phyllis, even at a time like this you still want to drive a wedge between us? Rage and grief had already scrambled my mind. I hissed a curse. The next second Jason's arm whipped up and a slap crashed across my face. Sophia. That was my grandmother. His eyes were red and swollen, revulsion pouring out of them. I told you to look after Nana, how could you? Hart buried his face in his hands, falling apart. She was the only family I had left. Blood dripped from my nose, dotting my arm. I smeared it away. It's not like that, Jason, I didn't abandon Nana. Remembering the scene, I sobbed as I spoke. The flash flood came too fast, too fierce. I pushed her up onto the roof of the car, but Jason wouldn't listen, his world had collapsed. Sophia, you killed her. From this day on we're enemies for life. The moment Nana's burial is over, we file for divorce. When the waters finally receded, I drifted home like a ghost. Nana was taken to the funeral home. Jason ran around arranging everything and never looked at me again. Hart simply tossed a divorce agreement at my feet. I hid in the bedroom, afraid to step out. With Nana's memorial portrait in the living room, guilt gnawed at me, and Phyllis seized the chance to move her 2 boys into the guest wing. Her excuse, her own house had been flooded. The kids tore through the halls all day, toppling priceless vases and scrolls, shrieking nonstop. Then they hammered on my bedroom door. Get out, murderer. Mom says this is her room now. They kicked the door open, grabbed my hair, and yanked. I looked up and saw Nana's portrait in the living room defaced with red marker scribbles. Fury shot through me. I grabbed each of them by the collar and flung them onto the broken porcelain shards. The boys were cut, blood pooling on the floor, bawling at the top of their lungs. Just then Phyllis walked in supporting a haggard Jason. At the sight of her bleeding sons she nearly fainted. Sophia, what are you doing? Jason stared at me, exhausted, his eyes ice cold. You caused Nana's death. You should be grateful I haven't thrown you out. And now you dare hurt 2 children? I gave a cold laugh, watching him pull the woman Hart called Phil into his arms. Right, I killed Nana and hurt your mistress's kids. What are you going to do about it? I wiped away the tears that slid down silently. Jason's eyes turned glacial. Hart stepped forward and clamped a hand around my throat, grinding his teeth. Spit out your poison again? Lightheaded from lack of air, I flung the signed divorce papers in his face and sneered. Mad because the truth stings? Shall I forward that little screen recording of you 2 to Phyllis's husband? I snatched Jason's phone and scrolled to the video. He instinctively covered the boy's eyes. Sophia. Jason's gaze was black. Hart looked ready to devour me. Hand the phone back. Now. Tears fell as I opened his contacts. To get Phyllis hired, Jason had even given her husband a job in the company warehouse. So now you're both scared? I located Phyllis's husband and pressed call. Jason, what do we do? My husband will kill me. Phyllis clung to Jason, knees buckling. Jason clenched his jaw, slapped the phone away just as it connected, and raised his hand. I lifted my chin and stared straight at him. The look in my eyes stung him. The blow never landed. What, afraid to hit me? I tried to laugh it off, but my voice cracked. Jason, you think you love Phyllis? You're just a love-starved kid looking for a mother substitute. Jason said nothing, only stared with frigid silence. I picked up the portrait the boys had ruined, wiped it clean, and set it back on the table. You play the devoted grandson, but if you hadn't dumped us on the road, Nana would still be alive. You're the one who killed her. Jason's jaw locked. Finally, Hart rasped, Sophia, get out. Phyllis hugged her sons and murmured, Jason, it's not your fault. Hart gently lifted her hand away. His eyes stayed fixed on me, but I didn't notice. I dried my tears and walked out with my head high. Jason, let's never meet again. The cold wind along the curb made my head throb. I thought of the 10 years I'd stayed in Eastbrook for Jason. We'd starved together, been cursed by landlords for unpaid rent, endured scorn on construction sites. Yet we had survived. I'd believed Jason and I had become family, bone deep. Turned out we couldn't beat a 45-year-old Phyllis. I cried and laughed by turns, then blacked out on the roadside. Just before everything went dark, I heard a familiar Sophie. I never imagined I'd see Julian in inland Eastbrook. A trust fund playboy from Harbor City. What was Hart doing here? That was the first thing I asked when I woke in the hospital. Julian pulled off his mask and shrugged with a lazy smile. Grandfather's sick of my face. When Hart saw the flood hit Eastbrook, Hart packed me off for some character building. Then his expression turned serious. Also, your old man asked me to bring you home. Your 2 elder sisters died in a car crash last month. You're now the only daughter the Hart family has left. Before I drifted to Eastbrook, I had been the youngest, most invisible child of the Harbor City Harts. I met my father once, at my mother's funeral. Hart had empires and multiple wives, 7 or 8 children. My mother's pregnancy had been an accident. Without his recognition, I was doomed to be a nameless bastard. So I came to distant Eastbrook and met Jason, who had a past as lonely as mine. The year we founded Hail Tech, we were short of capital. I dialed my father for the first time, almost begging, and secured 60% of the startup money. Jason never knew the largest anonymous equity stake belonged to me. Julian snapped his fingers, yanking me back. You've seen the headlines, the Von Hart dynastic marriage? I nodded. So your fiancé died and you need a replacement? Hart grinned casually. So, will you, Sophia, stand in for your late sister? I answered without hesitation. This was my only ticket back into the Hart family. Of course I would. As for love, that had stopped mattering long ago. Julian booked me a flight 3 days later. My phone pinged. I glanced down. Jason, where are you? I didn't reply. Standing before Nana's memorial tablet, Jason stared at his phone, restless. Hart had seen the graffiti scrawled across Eleanor's memorial portrait last night. Hart just hadn't said anything. Phyllis had been docile, quick to read the room. She'd scolded her kids right in front of him for a full 5 minutes. Hart had no excuse to lash out at someone else's children. Someone else's? A shiver ran through him. Yes. No matter how desperately Hart leaned on Phyllis, some part of him still filed her under outsider. Jason remembered the way Sophia had hurled the 2 kids out of the master suite last night. Her face had been ice. Now Hart regretted agreeing this morning when Phyllis begged to move into that same room. Listening to her children rampage in there, Hart felt a hot surge of irritation. Why hadn't Hart emptied the recently deleted folder in the photo album? Hart had always known his own twisted appetites, so when Hart met Sophia, willing to endure hardship beside him, Hart had buried them deep. Maybe the last 2 years of soaring profits had made him soft. In a reckless moment, Hart had made Phyllis his executive assistant, then promoted her to COO. The more Hart thought about it, the angrier Hart got. The longer Hart waited for a message from Sophia, the more frantic Hart became. She'd gone out last night wearing nothing but a thin silk dress. Unable to stop himself, Jason pulled strings and traced her phone. St. Anne's Hospital? His chest tightened with the same dull ache Hart had felt when Eleanor died. Hart bolted out the door and sped to the hospital. Julian was spoon-feeding me porridge when Jason burst into the ward. Sweetheart, are you okay? Hart lunged forward and grabbed my hand. Where does it hurt? Julian shifted aside, bowl in hand, smile lazy. She was passed out on the curb, almost scooped up by drunk scavengers. How could she possibly be fine? Jason glanced at the porcelain bowl and frowned. Who are you? Julian lifted an innocent shoulder, laughing softly. Relax, I'm the attending who brought her in last night. Jason's coiled muscles loosened at once. Thank you for saving my wife. I'll send you a commendation plaque. A snort escaped me. Jason, are you sleepwalking? We signed the papers last night. What makes you think you can still call me your wife? Jason pressed his lips together, exhaling in defeat. Baby, are you still mad? Pain and helplessness flickered across his eyes. I was harsh, I apologize. Rescue told me everything. Nana pulled you into the water, her death isn't on you. We've had each other's backs for years. If you can just accept Phil, we can pretend none of this ever happened. Before Hart could finish, I slapped his hand away. Jason, have you lost your mind? I stared into his stunned pupils and let out a cold laugh. You cheated on me with a 45-year-old woman, abandoned Nana and me for a quick thrill, and now you speak to me like you're doing me a favor? Aren't you ashamed? Jason's eyes flashed with outrage. Sophia, you're the only family I have left. Don't humiliate me. Fine, then. Hart clenched his teeth, yanked me upright. We've got the agreement. Let's hit City Hall right now. The 4-needle ripped free, pain buckled my knees. Julian steadied me, eyes glacial on Jason. I gritted a reassurance at Julian, then met Jason's gaze. Relax, I'll go with you. The moment the clerk stamped the divorce decree, I walked away without looking back. Jason kicked his own tire so hard the rubber tore. Then a text summoned him to an emergency shareholders meeting. On the third day, Jason marched into Hailtech with Phyllis beside him as COO, and froze when Hart saw Julian and me already seated. What are you two doing here? Hart scowled, then shrugged. Right, you still own 3%. Chairman Dillon cut off his muttering. Last night an anonymous shareholder suggested we strip Phyllis of her COO title. All in favor? Resentment toward her ran deep, hands shot up. Only Jason glared at Dillon. She's my hire. Why the vendetta? Under the table Phyllis clutched his sleeve, near tears. Dillon opened his mouth. I spoke first. It's settled. Objections are pointless. Phyllis no longer belongs in this room, she can see herself out. Jason sneered. Sophia, a mini-stake doesn't give you the mic. I held his stare until Alex, the VP of Finance, cleared his throat. Ms. Hart isn't a mini anything. Beyond her 3%, she's our majority shareholder. Jason blinked. What? Dillon straightened. She never told you? We learned 30 minutes before you arrived. Jason's mind raced, disbelief warping his face. You hid this for 5 years? Where did you even get that capital? When I stayed silent, Casey, legal counsel, spoke up. Doesn't matter. Ms. Hart will transfer all shares to Dillon and leave Eastbrook. Jason's stomach lurched. Leave? Sophia, where are you going? Julian lounged back, grinning. She's coming home with me, for the Von Hart dynastic wedding, of course. Hart skewered Jason with a look of pure contempt. Surely you've heard the Vons and Harts are uniting? Of course Hart had only Sophia Hart. A tremor shot through him. Hart shot up and grabbed my wrist. Outside. Now. Explain. I shook him off, eyes arctic. Explain what? Jason, you've got unfinished business here. Before the words left my mouth a man burst in, fist tangled in Phyllis's hair. Slut. Screwing around while I'm out of town? Phyllis crashed to the carpet, shrieking. Jason, help me. Jason stood frozen, then whipped toward me. You sent the screen recording to her husband? My smile was answer enough. After 2 ringing slaps, the husband wheeled on Jason. Mr. Hale, I thought that 12 grand a month gig was charity. Turns out you wanted my leftovers. She's old enough to be your mother. Disgusting much? You tossed away a devoted young wife for my cast-off shoe? The man's profanity sprayed like buckshot. Board members gawked, employees jammed the hallway. Phyllis kept sobbing for rescue. Jason's face turned charcoal, veins corded his forearms, 1 second from brawling. Then, sudden and absolute, revulsion for Phyllis flooded him. Back then Hart had leaned on her because she was married with kids, close to his mother's age, easy to treat as a stand-in and milk for comfort. Now Phyllis had become a headache, hysterical, nothing like the bottomless maternal mirror Hart could gaze into. The tastelessness was unbearable. Besides, Sophia was about to leave. Jason had no patience for the circus in front of him. Hart simply stretched his hand across the conference table toward me, voice soft, almost coaxing. Darling, come home with me. I lifted my eyes. Hart had slipped back into the gentle face I once knew. When I didn't answer, his brows knitted and Hart reached to circle my waist. Julian stepped between us. Mr. Hale. His smile was polite, but his eyes were shards of ice. Sophia and I have a plane to catch. Don't block the aisle. Jason's face darkened terrifyingly. Hart swung a fist and the two grappled. The boardroom dissolved into chaos. Shareholders ducked and shook their heads. Phyllis wailed as her husband dragged her out. I tracked the fight. Jason had grown up on construction lots. Every blow meant damage, and Julian was already losing ground. I smashed a teacup and barked, Jason, enough. Hart froze, panting, a cut on his chin, frowning at me. I shoved him aside, helped Julian up, and inspected the bruises starting on his cheek. Let's go. Airport. I walked Julian out without a single glance back. Jason had never felt this desolate. Hart remembered 5 years ago when Sight mocked him for being scrawny. They'd fought for half an hour until Sight's face was bloodied and Hart begged for mercy. Somehow Sophia heard, came sprinting to the Sight, wrapped gauze around his knuckles while crying her heart out. Her eyes brimming, voice choking as she asked if Hart was hurt. That image had stayed with him, but now Hart stared at the empty conference room. The tender, steadfast woman who had endured hardship beside him for years was gone. A spasm shot through his chest. Hart stumbled out. Sophia, come back. I hadn't expected him to chase me all the way to Eastbrook Airport. The cut on his chin was still bleeding, drops blooming red on his white shirt. Honey, don't go. Hart seized my hand, head lowered, voice shaking. In all these years Hart had smiled at me, raged, coaxed, never sounded this fragile. My mother remarried and forgot me, those uncles only sneered. The grandmother who raised me is dead. Darling, you're my only family left. I have no one but you. Hoarse, Hart pleaded, I never meant to hurt you. I'm love-starved, I lose control. I thought you'd never walk away. Acid rose in my throat. I tilted my head to trap the tears, then yanked my hand free. Jason, 10 years at your side is enough. If I turn back, you'll wound me again. The scars you carry from childhood can't be bandaged by goodwill. Yes, I had tried. From the first days in that cramped studio I'd known his hunger. Hart had been humiliated by bosses, gone hungry, taken beatings. A hypersensitive boy desperate for a mother's love. I recognized it because I was the same. Shared pain bred bottomless tolerance. We licked each other's wounds in our tiny nest. But I'm no savior. I met his shattered gaze and choked out, Jason, we are finished. For the last time, like those nights in the studio, I lifted my hand and brushed his hair. Then I turned away. Security held him back as Hart rasped my name. That day we severed every thread. After we landed, Julian brought me to Hart House to meet my frail, aging father, only the second time in 10 years. Hart traced my brows, struggling to recall my mother's face, trying to bridge the gulf. I've allowed your mother's memorial tablet into the Hart Ancestral Hall, Hart intoned, expecting gratitude. I simply smiled. Hart didn't know Mother had never wanted entry, she'd wanted freedom, and told me to chase whatever I desired. What I desired now was the Hart fortune and the power that came with it. So I asked, sweetly, offhandedly, what dowry Hart planned when I married into the Vaughn estate. Next day the steward showed me the 2 5-star hotels signed over to me, plus downtown penthouses, office towers, and a bank equity stake, more than enough. I would leverage Hart connections slowly. News of my return and upcoming wedding swept Eastbrook's press. Julian's polished looks and air status drew media fans, and after our hotel inspection we were mobbed. Taylor, does it bother you that your fiancé is divorced? Your family has never welcomed a second marriage, what do they say? Is this a dynastic marriage in name only? Do you keep separate lives? Julian kept smiling, voice unruffled. Whether Sophia's first marriage ended matters nothing to me, or to my family. What matters is that she's come back to me. Hart tightened his arm around my waist. The crowd buzzed at the word back. I blinked, and boarding the car I clipped my knee, splitting skin. Julian lifted me, worry and scolding in his eyes. Sophie, are you okay? The childhood nickname unsettled me. Before Mother and I were driven out, the Vaughn's second son had sneaked candies into our yard, calling me Sophie all along. When we had left the hotel far behind, Julian finally murmured, every word I told the press was true. I laughed softly. I know, truth or not, it didn't matter. I watched the city slide past, yet felt his gentle gaze never leave my face. Thank you for listening. On a scale of 1 to 10, how would you rate this story? If you enjoyed it, please like and share with friends. We look forward to your comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more tales. See you next time.